everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Ashley and today I'm going to be telling you all about my most anticipated thriller and horror book releases for the fall. This is going to be including books that are coming out through the rest of September, October, and November. I also just recently did a video where I talk about my fall TBR, so the books that I plan to read this fall, which included a few of these books that I had as ARC copies that I was planning to read early on, but there are way more books on this list for just books that are coming out that I am excited about, that are on my radar, and that I think you should be looking out for as well. There's so many exciting thriller and horror books coming out in the fall, so I'm not going to fully go super in depth on the synopsis. Also, I fully don't know because I haven't read these books yet, so it's going to be a little bit quicker because I want to be able to tell you about the most books that I can in a shorter amount of time. So let's go ahead and get started. First up, coming out on September 20th, we have Daphne by Josh Malerman. I've actually read an early copy of this one and I had a really good time with it. It is the newest horror book from the same author of Bird Box, A House at the Bottom of the Lake, and a ton of other great books. This is a story about this girl named Kit who is in high school. She plays on her basketball team. She has a lot of anxiety, and she especially has a lot of anxiety about the town's ghost, Daphne, potentially coming to kill her and her friends. This one had really great writing and it did a great job of just building a really interesting creature and monster that resembled the feelings of anxiety and really made you feel anxiety while reading it. It was a book that I wasn't super scared of while I was reading it, but afterwards it's really stuck with me and haunted me and made me kind of afraid to be in the dark with the lights off. So definitely recommend picking this one up when it comes out if you're interested in Josh Malerman stuff. Next up, also coming out on September 20th, we have Direwood by Catherine Yu. This is a YA velvet-clad 1990s gothic horror. You're following a girl who encounters a charming vampire who wants to lure her into the woods, just like her missing sister. I have not gotten to read as many YA horror books as I wanted to this year. I feel like I always love YA horror, so I really like to pick it up when I can, and this is definitely one that I'm interested in checking out because it's gothic, it's set in the 90s, it sounds a little bit romantic, and it sounds like a good time. Also coming out on September 20th, we have one of my most anticipated books of the year, Ghost Eaters by Clay McLeod Chapman. I'm obsessed with this cover. I hope I love this book so that I have a good reason to keep this book on my shelves because it is just one of my favorite covers I've ever seen. According to Chuck Wendig, this is a gothic punk graveyard tale about what haunts history and what haunts the human soul, an addicting read that draws you into its descent from the first page. In this story, you're following this girl named Erin whose ex-boyfriend asks her to bail him out of rehab. Again, this seems to be a recurring pattern. And then a few days later, he ends up dead. Then a friend tells her about Ghost, a new drug that allows users to see the dead. It has unfathomable side effects, and once you take it, you can't go back. Also coming out on September 20th, we have No Gods for Drowning by Hailey Piper. I have not read from Hailey Piper before, but I do hear their name come up often in the horror community, so I am interested in checking out some of their stuff. I'm not sure if this book is going to be the one that I want to start with because it doesn't personally sound like something I'm going to enjoy a ton, but because this is such a popular author, I did want to let you know about this book coming out in case you've missed it. This book is set in an alternate reality which updates mythology to near modern day. It is part hunt for a serial killer, part noir detective story, and unlike anything you've ever read before. Next up, coming out on September 27th, we have House of Hunger by Alexis Henderson. I have read from Alexis Henderson before. I read The Year of the Witching, and that ended up just being about a 3-star for me, but I'm definitely interested in checking out something else from this author, and I think this one sounds a little bit more up my alley. This is said to be a dark and enthralling gothic novel in which a young woman is drawn into the upper echelons of a society where blood is power. It's queer, there's vampires, it's gothic. You're following a woman named Marion who applies for a position to be a blood maid, I believe. She works with Countess Lissavet, who presides over the court and is loved and feared in equal measure, and the Countess ends up taking a special interest in Marion. Marion is eager to please her new mistress, but when her fellow blood maids begin to go missing in the night, Marion is thrust into a vicious game of cat and mouse. Next up, also coming out on September 27th, we have Isolation, the horror anthology, which is edited by Dan Coxon and features a lot of familiar names of authors who have stories in this collection like Paul Tremblay, Katrina Ward, John Langan, Brian Evanson, and a lot more. This is supposed to be a collection of 18 stories about the terrifying fears of isolation from the modern masters of horror. I'm trying so hard to get more into anthologies and short story collections, and I feel like I'm going to be able to enjoy them. It's going to be in the horror genre, but I haven't had a ton of success yet. But isolation is one of my favorite tropes in thrillers and horrors, so I'm hoping maybe this one could be a success for me. Also coming out on September 27th, we have It Looks Like Us by Allison Ames. In this story, you're following shy high school junior Riley Kowalski, who is spending her winter break on a research trip to the Antarctic, sponsored by one of the world's biggest tech companies. She joins 5 student volunteers, a company-approved chaperone, and an impartial scientist to prove that environmental plastic pollution has reached all the way to Antarctica. But what they find is something much worse, something that looks human. The comp titles for this are The Thing and Wilder Girls, and this is supposed to be a fast-paced Antarctic thriller. I also am obsessed with this cover, and again, I just said I love isolation, so hopefully this one is a lot of fun. Also coming out on September 27th, we have Leech by Kieran Ennis. This is said to be a surreal and horrifying debut that combines parasitic body horror with gothic family drama in a post-apocalyptic masterpiece that defies our understanding of identity, heredity, and bodily autonomy. And finally, on September 27th, we have We Spread by Ian Reid. I'm super excited for this one because I have read from this author before. This is said to be a mind-bending and chilling novel about the power of loneliness on a person's psyche. In the story, you're following an older woman whose long-term partner has recently passed away, and unbeknownst to her, provisions were made before her partner's passing for her to have a room in a unique long-term care residence, which is where she finds herself after having one too many incidents. But as the days start to blur together, Penny, with a growing sense of unrest and distrust, starts to lose her grip on the passage of time and on her place in the world. Is she succumbing to the subtly destructive effects of aging, or is she an unknowing participant in something more unsettling? And then for the last book to talk about that's coming out in September, we have The Family Game by Catherine Steadman. I feel like this was supposed to come out earlier in the year, and I was surprised that it was not out yet and has now been in September, but I could be wrong about that. But this one sounds really exciting. It is a thriller that has some sort of interesting kind of game element to it. You're following this woman who is marrying into this very prestigious family who is in the top 1%. And when she is joining the family, they seem really welcoming at first, and then her soon-to-be father-in-law gives her a tape. And on the tape is a shocking confession which sets the inevitable game in motion. So this is gonna be some kind of fast-paced psychological thriller that sounds really interesting. It has a very intriguing premise, and I have no idea where it's gonna go, but definitely sounds like a lot of fun. Now going into October, starting with Ghostwritten by Ronald Malfi, which is coming out on October 4th. This is actually a collection of 4 horror novellas, and I did have an arc of this one, so I have read this one a little bit early. I didn't fully finish it though, which is a little bit indicative of my experience with this one. I read the full first novella, and then some of the second, I think the full third, and then some of the fourth. All of these horror novellas are about cursed stories and cursed books, so if that is your thing, you're probably really gonna enjoy this, or if you like Ronald Malfi, you'll probably enjoy this. I had never read from Ronald Malfi before, so this is my first experience with his stuff, and I don't think cursed books is really my thing, so I'm still gonna try to read something else from him. I know people say Come With Me, his novel, is really popular, or Blackmouth, I think is the most recent one that came out, so I'm probably gonna check out another book from him, but this wasn't necessarily my thing. But if you like stories about cursed stories and some horror novellas all put together in one collection, then definitely recommend checking this one when it comes out in October. Next up, coming out on October 4th, we have Curse of the Reaper by Brian McCauley. This is said to be Scream meets The Shining, which is all I needed to know to pick this one up. I love Scream. Hello, and I love The Shining. That's my favorite book from Stephen King, so I'm really excited to see what this one is about. It says it is a page-turning horror tale about an aging actor haunted by the slasher movie villain he brought to life. This writer is also apparently a film and television writer, and this is his debut novel, so that's really interesting. And it is said to be a tightly plotted thriller that walks the tightrope between the psychological and the supernatural, while characters struggling with addiction and identity bring to light the harrowing cost of Hollywood fame. The cover of this one is also reminding me of the cover of Runtime by Catherine Ryan Howard, which I recently read and also really enjoyed, so that also just makes me excited for this one. Next up, coming out on October 4th, we have Loot by Jennifer Marie Thorne. This is said to be an unsettling folk horror novel about love, duty, and community, and the comp titles for this one are Wicker Man and Final Destination. This is set on the idyllic island of Loot, where every 7th summer, 7 people die, no more, no less. You're following Nina Treadway, who is new to the day. A Florida girl by birth, she became a lady through her marriage to Lord Treadway, whose family has long protected the island. Nina's heard about the day, of course, heard about the horrific tragedies, the lives lost, but she doesn't believe in it. It's all superstitious nonsense. Stories told to keep newcomers at bay and youngsters in line. And then the day begins. And it's a day of nightmares, of grief, of reckoning, but it is also a day of community, of survival and strength, of love at its most pure and untamed. When the day ends, Nina and Lute will never be the same. Next up, coming out on October 4th, we have Malice House by Megan Shepherd. This is a complex tale of dark magic and family secrets when a woman attempts to settle the estate of her father, an acclaimed horror novelist. Reeling from a failed marriage, Haven hopes an illustrated bedtime stories can be the lucrative, posthumous father-daughter collaboration she desperately needs to jumpstart her art career. However, everyone in the nearby vacation town wants a piece of the manuscript. Her father's obsessive literary salon members, the ink drinkers, her mysterious yet charming neighbor who has a tendency toward 3 a.m. bonfires, a young barista with a literary forgery business, and of course, whoever keeps trying to break into her house. But when a monstrous creature appears under Haven's bed right as grisly deaths are reported in the nearby woods, she must race to uncover dark, otherworldly family secrets, completely rewriting everything she ever knew about herself in the process. I've never heard of this author before, but it says that she grew up in her family's independent bookstore in the Blue Ridge Mountains, and I'm from North Carolina, so I love the Blue Ridge Mountains, and I also think that's really nice that she grew up in an independent bookstore and then became an author, so interested to check this one out. Next, coming out on October 4th, we have Such Sharp Teeth by Rachel Harrison. If that name sounds familiar, this is the same author of Cackle and The Return, two books which I have not read, but I have seen talked about a lot. Rory Morris isn't thrilled to be moving back to her hometown, even if it is temporary, but her twin sister Scarlett is pregnant, estranged from the baby's father, and needs support. So Rory returns to the place she thought she'd put in her rear view. After a night out at a bar where she runs into an old almost flame, she hits a large animal with her car, and when she gets out to investigate, she's attacked. Rory survives miraculously, but life begins to look and feel different. She's unnaturally strong with an aversion to silver, and suddenly the moon has her in its thrall. She's changing into someone else, something else, maybe even a monster. But does that mean she's putting those close to her in danger, or is embracing the wildness inside of her the key to acceptance? This is said to be a darkly comedic love story that is a brilliantly layered portrait of trauma, rage, and vulnerability. Next up on October 4th, we have Jackal by Erin E. Adams. I am obsessed with the cover of this one. I just love that night sky in the background and this really bright red and the bright, bold white letters. I think it is so beautiful. I love how ominous the description of this one is because you get this little blurb that says a young black girl goes missing in the woods outside her white Rust Belt town, but she's not the first and she may not be the last. And then there's like these little phrases that say it's watching, it's taking, it's your turn. I also think this is a debut novel, so always fun to give some support to debut novelists. Next up on October 4th, we have Mother Thing by Ainsley Hogarth, and I'm a little bit nervous about this one for myself now because the more I try to read comedic horror books, the less I like them, but I'm really trying to like them. I feel like that should be something I enjoy because I really like that in TV and movies, but I'm just not finding that to be super enjoyable in the book form, but I know a lot of people like that, and I'm obsessed with this cover, so I'm still gonna give it a try. This is said to be a darkly funny domestic horror novel about a woman who must take drastic measures to save her husband and herself from the vengeful ghost of her mother-in-law. And finally, coming out on October 4th, big day for publishing, we have Saturnalia by Stephanie Feldman. Carmen Maria Machado blurbed this one, and I love Carmen Maria Machado, and she said this is a heady mix of the most terrifying elements of our troubled past and inevitable future, an eerie, propulsive novel. It's said to be Donna Tartt meets Jeff Vandermeer in this literary horror novel set in Philadelphia during a citywide solstice celebration in which an exile from an elite social club comes into possession of an alchemically created being. Kind of glad this one is coming out now that I have moved out of Philadelphia because that might have freaked me out while I lived there. Next up, coming out on October 11th, we have The Hollow Kind by Andy Davidson. I did try to read The Boatman from this author before, but I wasn't particularly interested in that one. The writing style was a little bit too rich for me to get into at the time, but I am interested in giving this author another shot. This is said to be an epic horror novel about the spectacular decline of the Redfern family, haunted by an ancient evil. It is a jaw-dropping novel about legacy and the horrors that hide in the dark corners of family history. Andy Davidson's gorgeous gothic fable tracing the spectacular fall of the Redfern family will haunt you long after you turn the final page. And next up, coming out on October 11th, we have Mothwoman by Nicole Cushing. I'm still not seeing a cover for this one, so I do hope it does actually come out in October, but I haven't seen a ton about it yet. This is said to be a novel about family, grief, aliens, mental illness, trauma, sexism, the Mothman legend, COVID, and the encroachment of unreality into American political life. So I'm pretty sure this is supposed to be a satirical horror book, and all of those topics sound really interesting to bring together, so I really hope this one does come out out. Sounds super interesting. Next up, coming out on October 18th, we have Lavender House by Lev A.C. Rosen. This is a delicious story from a new voice in suspense. It is Knives Out with a queer historical twist. Lavender House, 1952, the family seat of recently deceased matriarch Irene Lamontagne, head of the famous Lamontagne soap empire. Irene's recipes for her signature scents are a well-guarded secret, but it's not the only one behind these gates. This estate offers a unique freedom where none of the residents or staff hide who they are, but to keep their secret, they've needed to keep others out, and now they're worried they're keeping a murderer in. Next up, coming out on October 18th, we have Keep It in the Family by John Marrs. I don't think I'm particularly interested in this one myself, but I know others are interested in John Marrs, so thought I would let you know about this one. It says a young couple's house hides terrible secrets, and not all of them are confined to the past. Mia and Finn are busy turning a derelict house into their dream home when Mia unexpectedly falls pregnant. But just when they think the house is ready, Mia discovers a chilling message scored into a skirting board, saying, "I will save them from the attic." Following the clue up into the eaves, the couple make a gruesome discovery. Their dream home was once a house of horrors. Next up on October 25th, we have Sign Here by Claudia Lux. This is another comedic horror novel that I'm gonna try, and I'm gonna see if I can like it, but I don't have my hopes up too high for myself personally. This is said to be a darkly humorous, surprisingly poignant, and utterly gripping debut novel about a guy who works in hell, literally, and is on the cusp of a big promotion if only he can get one more member of the wealthy Harrison family to sell their soul. It also says it is 416 pages, which sounds a little long for me, but we're gonna give it a try. Next up, coming out on October 25th, we have a new story coming out from Eric LaRocca, who is one of my favorite horror writers. There is nothing more ominous than the blurb of an Eric LaRocca novella. And this one is no different. It says, from the author of the viral sensation, Things Have Gotten Worse Since We Last Spoke, comes They Were Here Before Us, a novella written in pieces, designed to be consumed as a single, thematically cohesive work. The only thing more brutal than nature is love. And that's all we get. But it's said to be about 96 pages, so it sounds like another fun little fast horror novella. You really just can't go wrong with Eric LaRocca's works, so definitely excited to pick this one up. Now moving into November, coming out on November 1st, we have Strika by Johan Leekholm. This is a translated novel, so I'm not sure if I pronounced that author's name very well or even what language this was originally written in, but it was translated by Saskia Vogel. This was originally published in May of 2020, so this is just becoming translated, I believe, this November. It says, powerfully inventive and atmospheric, a modern Gothic story of 9 young women sent to work at a remote alpine hotel and what happens when one of them goes missing. I don't need to hear anything else. I love an isolation story where people are going missing. I'm gonna pick it up. Next up, coming out on November 1st, we have The Prisoner by B.A. Paris. This is a psychological thriller in which you're following this woman named Amelia, who has always been a survivor from losing her parents as a child in Paris to making it on her own in London. As she builds a life for herself, she is swept up into a glamorous lifestyle where she married the handsome billionaire Jed Hawthorne. But then Amelia wakes up in a pitch black room, not knowing where she is. Why has she been taken? Who are her mysterious captors? And why does she soon feel safer here, imprisoned, than she had begun to feel with her husband, Jed? Next up, coming out on November 1st, another one I am very excited for is The Resemblance by Lauren Nosset. On a chilly November morning at the University of Georgia, a fraternity brother steps off a busy crosswalk and is struck dead by an oncoming car. More than a dozen witnesses all agree on 2 things. The driver looked identical to the victim, and he was smiling. I love that intro synopsis. There's like 2 whole more paragraphs of the synopsis, but I like to just leave it at that. That sounds so creepy. And it does say there's a detective investigating this, which isn't always my favorite thing, but hopefully this one can be really fun. It sounds like a good academic, fall, atmospheric, creepy little fun thriller to read in the fall. So hope it's a lot of fun. Next up, coming out on November 1st, we have White Horse by Erica T. Worth. This is a gritty, vibrant debut about an Indigenous woman who must face her past when she discovers a bracelet haunted by her mother's spirit. I've said it before, and I still feel this way, that gritty novels aren't always my favorite thing, and I love that this even calls itself a gritty novel because I try to explain that sometimes and I don't know how to communicate what gritty is. I just know what it feels like. And this intro sentence, I feel like, does it really well. It says, heavy metal, ripped jeans, Stephen King novels, and the occasional beer at the White Horse have defined urban Indian Carrie James's life so far. And it's just like that aesthetic that becomes gritty in a story, which doesn't always resonate the most with me, but I am interested in trying this one because it is a debut novel from an Indigenous author, so I do want to support that. The cover looks really interesting, And I don't know, hopefully it'll be a fun one. It's supposed to be paranormal. It says there's some ghosts. I've been seeing people hype it up, so hopefully it's a fun one. Next up, coming out on November 1st, we have Small Game by Blair Braverman. This is a gripping debut novel about a survival reality show gone wrong that leaves a group of strangers stranded in the northern wilds. I'm particularly so excited for this one because I just finished watching a season of Alone, which is a show that is done by, I believe, Nat Geo or the History Channel. I don't know all of the networks, but I watched it on Netflix, and that is a show where they send 12 people to go live isolated out in nature and fend for themselves alone as long as they can, and then the winner gets $500,000. And so this is basically that, except something goes very wrong. So that sounds very fun and interesting to me just because I had such a good time just recently watching that show. I love isolated settings, survival kind of thrillers and horror books as well. So I think this one's going to be a lot of fun for me. Next up, coming out on November 8th, we have Secluded Cabin Sleep 6 by Lisa Unger. I've read at least one other thing from Lisa Unger before. I think she's the one who wrote Confessions on the 745. There's so many Lisas in the thriller community that's kind of hard to remember sometimes, but I know I've read from Lisa Unger before, and I don't have an overwhelming memory of really particularly enjoying her books, but I'm willing to try another book from her, and this is supposed to be a locked room thriller, which is one of my favorite tropes, so I'm definitely going to be checking this one out. It says, what could be more restful, more restorative than a weekend getaway with family and friends? An isolated luxury cabin in the woods, complete with spectacular views, a hot tub, and a personal chef. Hannah's loving and generous tech mogul brother found the listing online. The reviews are stellar. It's his birthday gift to Hannah and includes their spouses and another couple. The 6 friends need this trip with good food, good company, and lots of R&R, far from the chatter and pressures of modern life. But the dreamy weekend is about to turn into a nightmare. A deadly storm is brewing, the rental host seems just a little too present, the personal chef reveals that their beautiful house has a spine-tingling history, and the friends have their own complicated past with secrets that run blood deep. How well does Hannah know her brother? Her own husband? Can't she trust her best friend? And who is the new boyfriend crashing their party? Meanwhile, someone is determined to ruin the weekend, looking to exact a payback for deeds long buried. Who is the stranger among them? And finally, coming out on November 8th, we have A Sliver of Darkness by C.J. Tudor. This is a debut short story collection. I have read all of C.J. Tudor's novels. This is the first short story collection that she's doing, so I'm definitely going to be picking this one up because I have mostly enjoyed her works. There are 10 bone-chilling and mind-bending tales in this one, and you get a couple short synopses of them in this blurb. So we have one story is called Final Course, in which the world has descended into darkness, but a group of old friends makes time for one last dinner party. We have Runaway Blues, where thwarted love, revenge, and something very nasty stowed in a hat box converge. We have Gloria, where a strange girl at a service station endears herself to a cold-hearted killer, but can a leopard really change its spots? And then we have Not Ted, a case of mistaken identity has unforeseen fatal consequences. This is said that it is riveting and explosively original. A Sliver of Darkness is C.J. Tudor at her most wicked and uninhibited. So I'm really excited to see what these short stories look like from C.J. Tudor, and I think it's just gonna be a fun time overall. So that is it for all of the books I have to talk about that are coming out in the fall. If there are any on this list that you are excited about, let me know down in the comments below. And let me know if there's any that I didn't mention that should be on my radar, because I'm always trying to scope them out and make sure I have all the most exciting thriller and horror books on my radar, but I always inevitably end up missing some. So definitely let me know if there's any coming out that you're super excited about that I don't have on my radar yet. And if you want to leave an emoji in the comments down below to let me know you got to the end of today's video. Today, let's do a fall leaf emoji for the fall. But that is it for me. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all in my next video. Bye!